Hi, I'm Suzanne LaPierre, and I'm a librarian with the Fairfax County Public Library's Virginia Room and the co-author of the book Desegregation in Northern Virginia Libraries.
I'm Barbuschak, and I'm a librarian in Fairfax County Public Library's Virginia Room. We are here in the Huddleston Memorial Library, which is located in Old Town Hall in the city of Fairfax. Established in 1929, this library was the original county library in Fairfax, but it was segregated at its very beginning. In April 2021, Dr. Suzanne Hampton, a recently appointed library board member on the Fairfax County Library Board of Trustees, wanted to know, were Fairfax County public libraries ever segregated? That question got directed to myself and my colleague Suzanne LaPierre in the Virginia Room, and we researched and dug deep to try to find an answer for her. We also looked at what was going on at Northern Virginia public libraries in the area during the era of Jim Crow. One of the goals that we had for this book was to put into the spotlight the civil rights activists who have largely been forgotten since they worked so hard to tirelessly desegregate the libraries.
Just a few miles from where we're sitting today, in the city of Alexandria in 1939, an event occurred that was a milestone of civil rights activism, sometimes referred to as America's first sit-down strike. The Alexandria Library opened in 1937 for, quote, all persons of the white race living in the city of Alexandria, and for all persons of the white race who are taxpayers in Alexandria. Samuel Tucker was a young attorney born and raised in Alexandria who lived less than 2 blocks from the new library, but he had been denied use of it due to his race. In response, he planned a strategy that would involve a lawsuit and a protest. Tucker arranged for 5 young men between the ages of 18 and 22 to enter the library one day in August of 1939. The 5 young men arrived on the appointed day, smartly attired and well-mannered, and each one entered the library one at a time and requested to open a library account. Each was denied due to his race, whereupon he went to the shelves, took a book off the shelf, and sat at a separate table in the library to read. For this simple act, the police were summoned and the young men were arrested. Tucker had arranged for the press to capture these events, hoping to bring attention to the injustice of denying Black residents use of the library. However, the events did not lead to the integration of the Alexandria Library. Instead, city officials hastily arranged for a separate library for Black residents to be built. The Robinson Library opened less than a year later in 1940. It was smaller, open fewer hours, and had older books. So when did the Alexandria Library finally integrate? It wasn't until 20 years after Tucker's historic protest. It happened in stages between 1959 and 1962. Samuel Tucker, however, went on to devote his life to civil rights, appearing before the Supreme Court to speak on behalf of school integration, and running for Congress twice to encourage Black residents to vote. A World War II veteran, he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And now back to Chris to find out what the history of basketball has to do with the history of library integration.
Another civil rights activist that we write about in the book is Edwin Bancroft Henderson. Henderson spent a lifetime of championing civil rights in the Washington metropolitan area. In 1904, he was the first certified Black male instructor hired in this country when he went to work for DC Public Schools. Previously, in that summer of 1904, he attended Harvard University's Summer School of Physical Education, and that's where he learned the new game of basketball. He brought that game back to his students in DC and taught them how to play it, and today he's known as the grandfather of Black basketball. He moved to Falls Church in 1910 and helped desegregate Falls Church Public Library, which was established in 1899 and was segregated from the beginning. Mr. Henderson, along with the local pastor of the Second Baptist Church, Reverend Wallace Costner, got together and put pressure on the Falls Church Library Board to desegregate. The library board in turn directed Mrs. Elizabeth Graham to meet with Reverend Costner and Henderson, and the two discussed ways how they could better provide access to Black adults and children. The library finally desegregated thanks to their efforts, and in 1958, Henderson was involved with opening the permanent Mary Riley Stiles Library in Falls Church. Today, there is a state historical marker commemorating his civil rights work in front of his house.
Over in Loudoun County is an equally important, but even less well-known case of library activism. Samuel Cardozo Murray, and Josephine Cook Murray were a couple who owned an upholstery shop in Purcellville, which is part of Loudoun County. They were well known for the quality of their work and their ability to sew or build just about any kind of home decor. In 1956, the couple received a commission from President Eisenhower's sister-in-law, Mike Moore, who lived nearby in Hillsborough. She asked them to create a certain kind of Austrian-style window shades for her home. So the couple went to the Purcellville Library, which was the only public library in Loudoun County at the time, to do some research. But they were not permitted to check out a book due to their race. They decided to take legal action. Mr. Murray, who was 42 at the time, said, "If I did not pay my taxes, they would sell my home. Since I do pay my taxes, I felt that I should have the use of a book from the library, which is paid for with my taxes." It should have been an open and shut case, because as early as 1946, the state of Virginia had a law stating that all libraries receiving state funding must be serving all residents. However, several attorneys turned the case down until Oliver Stone of Alexandria agreed to take it on. He approached the library board and reminded them of their legal obligation to be serving all residents. The board, realizing that their funding and thus the very existence of the library was at stake, agreed to integrate the library in a vote in March of 1957. However, segregationists, calling themselves defenders of state sovereignty and individual liberty, refused to allow integration to occur without a fight. They vowed to close the library or move it to private ownership to avoid integration. After much drama, including two of the tie-breaking voters calling in sick, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors voted to fund the library, which would entail integration, in April of 1957. So in April of 1957, the library and the bookmobile became integrated. It was the first victory of the civil rights movement in Loudoun County. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Murray were free to continue their decorating work for Mrs. Moore, and when President Eisenhower and First Lady Eisenhower came to visit, they were so impressed when they saw the window shades hanging in the Moore's home that they requested the Murrays create window treatments and other furnishings for their home near Gettysburg. So if you go to the Eisenhower National Historic Site today, you'll see those Austrian-style window treatments in almost every room of the home.
If you were Black and living in the town of Vienna at the turn of the century, you were barred from using the only library in Vienna, which was known as the Town of Vienna Library. Established in 1897, it was segregated from the beginning according to its town charter. That all changed thanks to William McKinley Carter, a lifelong resident of the town of Vienna. He was a descendant of the Carter family who had been living in the area since 1847. After a lengthy career working for the IRS, when he retired, a shocking incident occurred between his children and the town of Vienna library. A white woman who was working in the library, unaware of the library's segregationist policies, checked out books for the Carter's children, and they were able to take them home with them. Once the library board of trustees found out they had these books, they went to Carter's house and demanded them back. That kind of perturbed Carter and some of his friends, and outraged citizens met in his living room in 1958 to informally establish the Friends of the Library of Vienna, Virginia. They worked to desegregate the town of Vienna library, but once it quickly became apparent that they weren't going to change their ways, they courted Fairfax County Public Library in hopes of opening a branch in Vienna. After tremendous community support and financial assistance, the Patrick Henry Library opened in a Vienna shopping center storefront in 1962. Today, there is the permanent Patrick Henry Library on Maple Avenue, and Mr. Carter and his wife Lillian are enshrined in a portrait in the library's meeting room.
For much more about these brave individuals and the situation here in Northern Virginia, please see our book, Desegregation in Northern Virginia Libraries. It also includes examples from elsewhere in Virginia and Washington, D.C. The book includes over 100 photographs, many of which have never been published before, and most of the research in the book has also never been published before. You'll also find out about many local landmarks you can visit today to experience some of this history firsthand. Thank you for joining us to hear more about these great Virginians who made libraries more accessible for all. Their legacy continues to inform the work of libraries today.